And now it is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Laura Fillyaw. She is our education specialist at our Adolescent treatment program. Laura joined Skyland Trail after 22 years in Metro Atlanta Independent Schools, where she served as a teacher and also an administrator for middle school and high school students. Her undergraduate is in English from Auburn University, and she has two master's degrees, one in professional counseling and one in secondary English education from Georgia State University. So we're so glad to have Laura on the Skyland Trail team. She's such an asset being an educator and a therapist and also having years of experience. So please join me in welcoming Laura.
Thanks, Julie. So a lot of my presentation, you will probably very much hear the teacher in me, teacher first, and then the counseling. I always used to tell the parents of my students, I use the counseling degree far more than the education degree because the education, a lot of it was common sense, like let's figure this out. And I love bringing that here because school is so hard for our kiddos. Y'all are on the front lines. You are seeing these children who are on the struggle bus with academics and the whole range of issues that can bring about. So today, what we're really looking at is process, planning, and promotion for our kiddos who are here. Our clients a lot of times come in pretty disenfranchised and feeling like they have no voice or even ability to participate in an education in any way, shape, or form. And a lot of what we're doing here is trying to figure out how to best support those children, not only to make strides with their DBT skills, understanding the world, relating to the world, but also that they can take those things they learned and take them back to their school setting. Because we very much want to see them almost always in an in person school setting. I will talk a little more about online school in a few minutes for all of the blessings that has brought. We have a lot of challenges too. The pre-admissions process, I am not generally super involved before admitting unless we have some concerns. So the three areas, intellectual impairment, we do have a cutoff of 80 IQ because we are a heavily verbal program, lots of fast-paced instruction going on. Not that we can't do some scaffolding around that, but we need to make sure everybody can keep up because if someone isn't at a place where they can do that, that's just going to cause more anger and frustration, not fair to them. Learning differences, thanks to all of my work in the classroom, I am able to work with a host. We've got dyslexia, dysgraphia, we have different things with processing disorders, pieces like that, dyscalculia, you name it, we have seen it. Most learning disorders we can work with. And if a child, let's say, is having a one-on-one in their classroom, like if they need a full-time facilitator in their classroom, we're probably not going to be able to do that. We don't have the staff to sit one-on-one all the time to break everything down. And I am, as far as I know, our only teacher-trained person who knows how to do all the scaffolding that I could create lessons that would better suit kiddos who need that kind of and structure and breakdown. And so we have to be real careful because we don't want to say we can support this if we can't. Homeschool I am involved with a lot because, for better or worse, homeschool can be outstanding. I have friends who do it incredibly well and it's wonderful. And then there are homeschools where the child actually hasn't been doing anything and they're just at home. And so there's a wide swath of what homeschool can mean to different people. I was on the phone with the head of homeschooling for South Carolina about the time that it's registration time and listening to his teacher talk, bless his heart. He was like, so people are applying today. And I said, yes, I know. And he said, and a lot of them aren't going to get what they need. And I was like, what I'm hearing you saying is there is no homeschooling going on. And he was like, your words, not mine. And yes. And so we have to be real careful to see where are our kids, because if they are not up to grade level, that brings a whole host of other issues. We can do supports around catching our kiddos up, and that can be a lot more frustrating and just compound other issues going on. we need a lot of paperwork before admissions just to help us hit the ground running. And I'm not going to say tons about this, but if we have releases of information, that's huge. The sooner I can talk to the school, the better. One thing we do here is for the release of information, we don't ask for the name of the school. So if it's the release is to talk to not Smith Elementary, Smith High School, we actually ask for what is the district level, because as y'all know, you're not just going to work with the actual school itself, you're going to work with the county office. Homebound teachers sometimes will come into the mix and they're not from that school. They might be from another district school. So we get a blanket for the district, the contact information for the school counselor. That's who I'm usually in contact with. How to log into platforms, because miraculously, when the children arrive, those login information, like those details, they're just gone. Oh, I don't know those. And that prolongs us being able to get started, which can be problematic. Any up-to-date accommodation plans that the kiddos have, and any psychological education testing they've already had that can help us understand better how we can support them in what's going on. So those are just some things beforehand that are really good for us to have. Then after admission, I get a lot of calls for people who are about to admit. And they're saying, we're coming next week. Can you go ahead and fill out the hospital homebound paperwork? Because a lot of our children do want that hospital homebound one-on-one, so that that teacher is kind of the liaison between the school and the child, and lots of one-on-one attention. And I always say, as soon as the child fully admits, we are happy to fill that out for you. We are a voluntary program. It's not super common, but we can have a child come to get checked in and then just say, nope, no, I don't want to do this. And so I cannot sign off on anything ahead of them being here. But the moment they walk through the door, we can get hospital homebound paperwork turned in, or a letter of attendance, depending on what the school needs. So there are a lot of different things that the schools will ask for, and we can definitely provide all of those. During treatment, we have a whole host of things to think about. So first of all, we have all the different formats for school right now. We have in-person school, and that is either in person, like we think of traditional school. It can be a big public school. It could be an alternative school. It could be a private school. You've got all of the different things. Each of those kind of have their own ways of working with children who are in treatment. So we have to kind of know where we're headed with that. Homeschool, again, sometimes homeschool is like all the things put together. We have different tutors and we have different lessons, and we're involved in all of these extracurricular activities, and it's super. And then other times it's someone sitting in the basement and logging into a program for 10 minutes a day, and that's it. That's what they do. And that's homeschool. And so that has left them behind. So figuring out how to maybe catch them up or bring them up to speed. Online school, again, when COVID hit, we did not have enough of these ready to go. Thanks to COVID, that is one good thing that came out. There are a lot more options. Some of them are really good. Some of them have their challenges. And our children, as you know, they're smart. They know what they're doing, especially with technology. And a lot of the online schools, if you log in for X number of minutes a day, you're present. You're counted as present and attending. So 15 minutes a day for one particular program I know, the parents would get a notification, your child went to school today. And that wasn't actually really going to school, but okay. And then my last one is always like, what school? What? We do occasionally have children come in who really just haven't done any school for a good while. Sometimes that is a matter of the school actually withdrew the child and the parent didn't know. We have had that happen, or the parent didn't realize, I should say. We know there's probably somewhere an email or a letter that came out, we have withdrawn your child, but the parent's not realizing the child is not enrolled anymore, or my child just isn't going, so we withdrew them, but we're not doing anything right now for school, which is a whole different issue as well. So kind of figuring out where are we coming from and what kind of student do we have. We've got really high achieving kids who probably need to take fewer classes and take a step back. Think super perfectionistic. think I am working on homework for 7 hours every night, like no balance at all. And that's a huge problem for some of my kids. Then we have my kids who are like, I worked for 30 minutes. That's plenty. No real fire or desire to do well. They're just like, whatever, it's okay. So finding balance on either side can be a process, really, with these kiddos. Learning which school wants to do what. So I'm thinking now of in-person schools. Online schools translate really well here because the kids are already doing them at home. And so they can just do their work here instead. Homeschool, if it is a direct homeschool program, for example, my mom is teaching everything. That can be problematic because I am the full-time person for education. I have a part-time assistant and I can't do one-on-one teaching all day with one child. And so sometimes we have to figure out some online different programs for them to use so they do have more support. In-person schools, sometimes they do not want to deal with us. I understand that. I appreciate that because having been a teacher who sent plenty of kids to places like this, it's hard. And it is not uncommon for the school to say we would rather pay for the online school than have to figure out homebound services. It's cheaper for the school district to do online school. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. For classes and time to work, our children have a packed schedule. I mean, there is a lot going on here every day. I try and keep that in mind all the time because they're already done. The analogy I used to use for my children who had ADHD, they would get home, they would have a meltdown. Mom calls me and says, you know, you said he did really well at school today, but we're having a meltdown. What is this? He used all of his energy to stay focused and attend during the day. Once he gets home, there is no more. There's no time, there's no energy, there's no time. And so figuring out a balance, again, it's all about balance for our children. So how much time do our children have? Usually they have 2 hours a day. And we have to remember this is a therapeutic environment. They can be pulled for a family session or an individual session or to see the psychiatrist. And so there is some fluid movement around that. That is not to say that we can't guarantee certain things, thinking about, say, the end of a semester and exams are coming. We can block off time to make sure nobody's going to come in and be like, surprise, you have a meeting. We can block that off for them. But about 10 hours is what we can count on for them. Can they do homework in the evenings? Yes, there's downtime. And again, they're exhausted. They have been working so hard all day because the emotional drain is just so big. So a few of them, some of them, a handful, can do some work in the evening, but by and large, it's going to be when they're with me. They also only have computer access when they're with me during the day for those 2 hours. So at night, it has to be something like a handout or a book that they're reading for English. How many classes can you take? Wow. Thinking about 10 hours a week, that's not a lot of class time. My kiddos will normally take 2 or 3 classes, and that's it. I mean, if you think about it, if you put more than that, how is that fair to the child to ask them to do all of that work in 10 hours a week? It's just, it can't be done. And some school districts will tell me that children cannot stay enrolled unless they have at least 5 classes, which I am confused about that. And I've voiced my confusion to people higher up than the school system sometimes, to say, I don't understand because my children are similar to the children who have, like, they should be treated the same way that children with medical conditions are treated. I've had students before who were at CHOA getting cancer treatment and they weren't taking 5 classes. They were taking the 1 or 2 that they could handle. And so sometimes the school is very flexible. Sometimes they're not as much. We have to negotiate, see what we can work out, and see what we can handle. Really, that is kind of a fluid moving target, if you will. And we just have to kind of wait and see. Some districts I already know, thankfully, after 3 years, I kind of know this district, we're going to be able to do this. This is not going to be an issue. Some districts, it's like, ooh, yes, this is where we are, unless we've had some major changes. This is where we are, and we're going to have 5 classes. And can we do that, or do we need to withdraw? And as y'all know, as clinicians, the withdrawal issue is a big one. A lot of schools don't necessarily want to have to work with us because it's hard. Teachers have enough to do already, way too much to do already, frankly. And so to add one more layer of communication, to be in communication with me, to be balancing for the student, it's hard. And so some will actually tell the parents, your child needs to withdraw from our school. We can't support that. Sometimes it is better to withdraw than to fight that battle. Other times the parents want to fight that, and that is just fine. Because once I come in and I start saying, how are you reaching this child's needs and supporting this child's needs as someone who falls under the Americans with Disabilities Act? And we have IDEA for reaching the children in the schools and making sure that they're getting what they need. A lot of times we get some backpedaling on, oh, well, no, we never said you had to withdraw. Let's work together. And so sometimes we'll get that, and that's fine. But a lot of parents don't know. And something that y'all are doing as clinicians, and some of y'all I know are school, places of school or treatment facilities, educating the parents about what the schools need to do is a big piece because not all parents know. And they don't know what they don't know, and they believe what the school tells them. Why shouldn't they? So sometimes that can be iffy when thinking about the schools and the classes and withdrawals. Deciding which classes. Normally, we're going to go with math and we're going to go with English for sure, because those are the ones all 4 years you've got to take and to keep these kiddos on pace as best as possible. Those two core we're going to keep. I was an English teacher back in the day, and so I can support fully on that front. My assistant, Allison, who's here part time, she is a math person, which thank goodness for her, because I that is not my gift. She can help with math. And so normally we can balance the humanities and the STEM. So whatever it is we're taking, we can balance some of that. The third class, because oftentimes we'll do three, the third class, we work with the school to kind of figure it out. But 99% of the time, the school is definitely saying English, math, yes, those two, and then we'll figure out whatever the third might be. One thing to think about, we have had children come in before thinking about which classes to take that they were in ninth grade math, like whatever that might be, usually algebra one. And as time went on, we could see that something wasn't right, like that we weren't missing. The program that we use Advantages Schools International as the online learning platform that we've just kind of adopted because they work really well with us and with the needs that our kiddos have. Sometimes we will ask them to give a STAR test for a placement test because on occasion we find that my kiddo who is in ninth grade math really is testing out at more of a fifth grade level. Wow, like what does that mean? And so then there are a lot of other ramifications that we end up working with the school to see how we can do remediation, get the child caught up, because that frustration piece, again, that's not the kind of frustration we need while the kids are here. We need them to be able to be attending to the emotional issues and learning to deal with school is hard. And so how to balance that a little bit. APs or IB programs. IB programs also, anything that's like super advanced, those are hard for our kiddos to keep up with because think about you've got 5 hours usually seat time during the week for those classes. And then they say for every hour that you are in that class, you should be doing at least an hour of work outside. There are the 10 hours that we have for our children. That's it. That's all we got. And so APs are extremely limited. We are not going to take more than one AP. If that is even an appropriate thing. I had a parent call me one time and say, we're looking, she's in 5 AP classes. And I said, that's great. And here is where we are. We will not be able to support more than one. And mom said, well, she won't accept that. And I said, well, are you going to accept that? Because that's a parent issue. And mom said, I'm going to support whatever she wants. And I said, I'm really sorry. But think about the extra stress that's going to add on to her if she came and had 10 hours a week and is trying to do 5 AB classes. That is not to say if you're close to the end of the semester, we won't support as you try and finish things out, because our children do come at different times during the year. If there are 3 weeks, 4 weeks left in the semester, and you're trying to finish up those two AP classes, we're going to try and work with you and support you and get that done. We don't want you investing that whole year or that whole semester and then losing it because of a few weeks. So we do try to be flexible and mindful of the students' distress level at the time. Some schools, and y'all may have had experience with this, will say, oh, Johnny is so overwhelmed. We're just stopping all of his classes because he doesn't need to do school. He needs to completely focus on himself. To which I say, yes, and in the DBT world. Yes, he does need to focus on himself, and school has been a challenge for him because of anxiety, because of being overwhelmed, because of whatever reasons. If he doesn't have any practice in how to do some balancing, we're doing him a disservice. And so we really want to focus on how can we do enough so that we can practice school skills, how to communicate effectively, how to ask for what we need, how to deal with the frustration when you hear things you don't want to hear. So we need that to be part of the world. So I encourage them to be the school, to be understanding and to hold some boundaries around expectations for what they need to do. For our logistics, our children can reach out to their teachers if they are staying enrolled in their school of record. They can communicate with their teachers. We're monitoring their online activity. So if they are still using their school platforms, Google Classroom, Blackboard, Canvas, you name it, we have all the different ones going on. If you still need to be using that, that's fine. We're monitoring, we're watching. We are not supposed to be chatting Google Chat. Why schools leave Google Chat open really baffles my mind. I understand in some ways, but other ways I'm like, that is an invitation to get into some nonsense. So we're trying to support them in not emailing their friends, things like that. But they need to learn how to meet with their teachers and email their teachers. A lot of our kiddos will not ask for help. And so we do a lot of scaffolding around the first time. I might send the email and copy Susie on that. And I will say, Susie is having a hard time getting started. Could you tell us more about such and such project? Susie, is there anything I forgot to add? And so that might be where we start. And then each week, Susie ultimately will be getting closer to adding her own piece into that puzzle and then doing the emailing on her own eventually, just for practice. A lot of times I will even give a teacher a heads up if the child feels particularly scared of that teacher. Most of the time we don't need to be scared, but I'll try and give them a heads up and just be like, hey, here's what's going on. Here's how much time she's had to work this week. Her assignment isn't done. She's going to ask for an extension. This is legit. Like, this is not her goofing off. So we'll look at that. Some of our children will attend classes, especially if they are online classes. If that fits with their schedule, they will go to class virtually. We have cubbies so that everything is blocked out. There's nobody walking behind anybody. No one can see anything. So they can attend their classes and ask questions. They can have teacher meetings. A lot of schools have document-based assessments. They have phone calls and video chats with teachers to do testing. We can totally support that. Tutoring, normally we don't have to have tutors, but if a child needs a greater level of support than I can give or Allison can give, thinking Spanish. Now, I had a child who had to finish a Spanish class. It was Spanish 4. I mean, I'm hola and como estás, and that's it. That's all I can do. And so we said, Mom and Dad, we can't support that. Would you like to hire a tutor? And we worked out some tutoring sessions. So we can support all of those different pieces with that. Just so y'all know, on the teacher interactions, some of our children can be less than appropriate in their interactions with teachers. Some of them, it's because they don't know how to do it. Some of them, it's because they're angry and just don't care what other people think. So a lot of times, if there is a teacher meeting going on or a homebound teacher meeting, with a student, I will actually ask if it's a student that we know has trouble or struggles with that. I'll ask them to record. And what we can do is go backwards after the meeting and look at where things went off the rails. Like where did the feelings start coming up? And it's really, that has been a beautiful thing. It's pretty time intensive. My children with ASD diagnoses have actually done pretty well with it. And so we can look at it, we can talk about what are the different ways we could have said things. And so I can do some coaching on the back end. I also do coaching with teachers because some of our teachers are afraid of our children, not afraid of them in a way like my children are going to be violent towards them, but afraid that the children will break. And oh my goodness, this child engages in self-harm. And I know that. So if I say XYZ, I could hurt the child. And so I do a lot of coaching with teachers in the midst and after the fact with no, you have expectations. Here's what the child has learned. And this is how the child knows to help him or herself if something is coming up that makes them want to self harm. No, we're okay. I mean, like, let's not be mean. And there are wonderful teachers, and teachers get frustrated sometimes, and it may not come off sounding as loving and supportive as it might have been intended. But how can we work together to hold that boundary appropriately for the child to receive the boundary and then here for the child to say, I need some help because this made me feel really anxious. Because occasionally I'll have a child hang up on a teacher or in the chat, like just, I'm done, the end. And so that coaching piece is pretty significant for them. Accommodations and advocacy, there's a lot going on behind the scenes. We offer psychological educational testing. The majority of our children who have not had recent testing will have testing while they're here. I am very lucky because Dr. Rothman, our staff psychologist who does the testing, she works very closely with me to say, are you seeing anything that might indicate some school issues, like some learning issues that maybe are undiagnosed? Should I add this test in or this test in? So what's going on that front? So we'll have that. A lot of my children do come in with 504 plans or IEPs to help with accommodations and support. The RTIs, and I don't know how many of y'all have been involved with the RTIs, response to intervention. I love response to intervention because not every child does need to jump right to a full accommodation plan. And sometimes that can feel like a hoop to jump through when we already know the child really needs a 504 and IEP. I can help push on those things. The parents sometimes are afraid to push because they don't want their child labeled as the one with the difficult parents and the people who are giving them a hard time. And so I can push and be like, I'm feeling confused because if the child is already here in treatment, clearly the regular responses weren't working. So how could we move along a little further to those accommodation plans? A lot of our parents don't even understand or know about accommodation plans. And so I can help support on that end. Like, what should we be looking for? Put everything in writing, create a paper trail, always have everything in an email in writing. Because a lot of times schools will say, oh, we can support Jim just fine. We don't need a 504 and IEP. And some schools are beautiful and can do that. And a lot really need that extra layer of protection for the children to make sure things are happening. As children that y'all work with, some of them, a lot of them sometimes will come in with all failing grades. And if there's a 504 or an IEP in place, I can come back at the school and say, I would like to know about what accommodations you were using. Because if the child failed, quite frankly, and they were not being given those accommodations, the school really doesn't have a position to stand on if they weren't doing any of the things that they were supposed to be doing. And so how can we appropriately advocate for the child to make sure she got those things before they're just like, oh, she failed, we're done. And so I will ask questions about that, whereas parents don't always know to do that. As we get close to discharge, I take part in a lot of reentry meetings. And sometimes that's just with the school counselor. Sometimes that's with a whole team of teachers. Sometimes that is I feel like the free world sometimes. It's the staff psychologist and it's the school social worker and it's the teachers and it's the principal and there's this huge meeting, but I'll go with the children virtually to be there with them and with the parents. And so I can help on that front, especially if we're looking into easing back into the school year. And how do we start with a few hours each day and work our way back in? Reentry meetings are also important because sometimes the school counselors, bless them, their hands are tied in a lot of ways. There are a lot of things they cannot recommend that they know would be helpful. And so a lot of times I've had them call and say, hey, we have an accommodation that the child can use her phone to call home anytime she wants to in the middle of class and just walk out. How that became part of an IEP, I'm not real sure, but it was part of it. Like I saw it written down and they were like, is that appropriate? And I was like, oh no. And here's what we can do instead. And so I can support the school counselors on that side. And I can say to parents, that shouldn't be in an IEP. And here's why. And here's what we're going to do instead to make sure that your child is going to be supportive. So a little bit of balancing. So the meetings with the school counselors can be very important. As those of you who work in schools know, there are a lot of times that your teachers can be like, I know this child has challenges with, and then insert a diagnosis here. Teachers cannot diagnose. We know that. And when children come here, if they've never had testing, I have sometimes had the school counselors say, I think this kind of test might be very beneficial. And so I can pass that along to Dr. Rothman when she does the testing to say, hey, clearly the school has some suspicions about this piece. So what can we do to support them with that? For discharge and after discharge, I am still with these children. I am still with them along the way. So I will have people call me well after the fact to say, hey, we're about to renew our 504. Hey, we're about to meet with her new teachers that she's going to have this year. How can we convey to the teachers all the needs that she has and not sound like we're telling them what we have to do and so there's a lot of parent coaching going along with this. I've had parents call me a few years after the fact to say this is going on, what do you think, how does this fit into the accommodation plan that we have? Sometimes it fits really well in, sometimes it doesn't at all. And we talk about how to ask those questions without sounding accusatory because it's no one wants to accuse the school and sometimes things aren't being done. So how do we balance that piece? We also thinking about homebound, or not sorry, homebound meetings, IEP meetings and 504 meetings. If I attend those, sometimes I can help kind of coach the teachers and administrators around the meanings of certain things. So I'm thinking of a child who does have ADHD and does have extended time as an accommodation. That's a pretty standard accommodation. And what I learned while the child was here for 12 weeks is that this child will just not start because he knows he has the extra time. So he just doesn't start it. And then when it's actually due, oh, I couldn't finish it because my extended time. And so I might suggest things like, instead of just saying it's an extended time, the child has to advocate. And here's a process for what that advocacy should look like. So instead of waiting till the end, they have to have check ins along the way so that we don't game the system. Because, I mean, these children, mental health concerns or not, they're teenagers. Of course, they're going to try and get away with things. They're kiddos. And so to work with them on that's what that should look like. A lot of teachers, too, will say, I feel like Johnny isn't doing what he needs to do for my class right now. And I'm a pretty straight shooter because I believe that teachers need to be respected in what they do and their time needs to be respected. And if a child is goofing off, I will 100% say you need to grade what he turned in because that was the effort he put in. And that we need to be done with that. And whether that's a failing grade or not, it is what it is because he was not working to the best of his ability. My kid's best of ability doesn't always look like your average kiddo and who's still attending in-person school, But on a gauge, like some days, I just have to say, okay, I know you had a hard morning and you have now used your DBT skills for deep breathing and temperature change, and you did some distracts. So now it's time to do some work. We now have to try that. And so getting into the habit of, I don't feel like working, I can use skills, I can get back to work and do things. And the children know I will communicate that to the school. They know if I see cheating, 100%, I will call the school and be like, okay. So when Jane was taking her test today, she chose to Google some answers, and it was an unfortunate choice. What do we want to do now? um, I will let the school know. Likewise, if the child is having a hard time and just is not capable, and sometimes that's a few days, depending on what's going on, I will 100% call the school and say, I know nothing is coming in. I am sorry nothing is coming in. We are doing, honestly, the best we can. And today that just means sitting in a room and reading a book. That is the best we can do today. I promise you, as soon as that changes, we will make that up. I promise. And so I try to be really cognizant of letting those teachers know. And I will have teachers call me and say, okay, is this legit? Is this not legit? They just told me this. I frequently send an email when the children first get here to say, if anybody is claiming they cannot do work for XYZ reason, and I'm not copied on that email, please check with me, because it's amazing the number of projects that they report they cannot do because they're in treatment right now, and that is baloney. They need to be doing those projects. It might not look exactly the same, but they need to do that project. So no, we're not doing that. So most of the time, the teachers really, I think, respond well to that, and have been really supportive. And I appreciate them for that. Sometimes I feel like when I was an administrator, I always tried to remember what it was like for my teachers. Sometimes administration, it does get overwhelming and it is hard to remember all those pieces. So a lot of times the teachers just come straight to me, and that's fine. I email with teachers far more than I email with parents, because literally sometimes the schools are emailing 5 to 10 times a day. Now those are my more extreme children, but that's sometimes what it takes, especially if we're getting started. Also, when a child discharges, I will say to the clinician at the school, these are the top 5 DBT skills that this child has identified as their go-to. So if the child is becoming dysregulated, the school counselor has 5 skills that they know are go-tos. I also send a little kind of cheat sheet overview of DBT skills, and so they know what should be expected. And then I say, give them 5 to 8 minutes to use their skill, and then they go back to class. This is not optional, because a lot of times they are still teenagers. When they get back to school, they want to see if they can still get away with staying in the nurse's office all day like they used to, because that was fun, or comforting or whatever. And so I encourage the schools to really draw that line and say, no, schools are scared of that. Well, they're self-harmers, or they tried to kill themselves last time. Yes, and if we can't hold them accountable, then we're going to go back to old habits in a hurry. And I've had schools call me and say, Stephen is in the office right now. He is in the nurse's office saying he can't go back to class. And I will say, put Stephen on the phone, because they can still call me 90 days after. And I'll say, Stephen, what have you done? What skills have you used? Well, I kind of, and I'm like, no, what are we doing? What are we doing? And we might do some box breathing on the phone, and then it's time to go back to class, and that's fine. And we can hold that line. And then for the nurse or the teacher, whoever it is, to watch me model that, they know next time they can do that. So I'm all about, like, no, we're not going to do this. We're done with this. The end. So yes, I encourage my schools to let the children fail and have supports in place if and when that happens, so that they know how to best support those children and figure out, how do we move forward from this? Because a lot of my kids do struggle. Likewise, for my overachievers, I try and really encourage those school counselors to have some structure in place for my kids who are taking, they go back to school and do take 3 APs. Let's be prepared for when we have high stress times. How are we going to go ahead and be proactive and check in, so that Ashley isn't going to just fall apart, because she is a perfectionist and she will just keep it all inside until it's a meltdown. So how can we work together to do that. So it's kind of both ends of the spectrum. So that is kind of an overview of school, how everything works with it. And I would love to know what y'all are seeing and what questions y'all have about what we do, if you have ideas for how to better do things, if you would like to see something different, if you've seen something work with a client you've had, anything like that. I would love to just hear from y'all and see what questions you have.